what age is the right age to, educate kids about queer and LGBTQIA and all that?
Canadian fabric, and I must say also Canadians don't have also struggle with the acronym. It's changed over the years. So that's a very controversial question.
Okay. Interesting. So, welcome to the show, sir. And I know you have done some quite extensive research into how the workplace diversity helps, how we can teach our employees to be more productive at workplace, and how we can bring in more diversity to help increase the output. So, quickly for the audience, if you can tell what you do, how you do it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a professor and I'm a Canada Research Chair in Critical and Creative Continuous Learning, which is at the University of Manitoba in the Faculty of Education. And I research just what you said, how to make diversity much more part of our workplace fabrics. And I look at not only diversity in sense of identity, but also diversity of ideas and perspectives and such, and create a workplace that's really fosters that type of pluralism that I think is really important, because that's what Canada is known internationally for, is our multicultural, plural backgrounds. So, and in reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. So we can consider, how can we take this, I guess you could say this dynamic, this background, and make this much more entrenched within our workplace learning.
Interesting. Do you think it's always the case diversity with an identity will allow in diversity of ideas?
No, it's not always the case.
Okay.
Sometimes we have standardized workplaces where you have to follow routines, and that is supposed to lead to more productive workplaces and organizations. But I think that's a failure in some way, because when you standardize routines, standardize the way that things work, they end up silencing people in their own perspectives and their own ideas. And so why don't we just open those doors a little bit further, and hear some of what they have to say.
And I think most of the companies that we see around are allowing for it, where people can have their own ideas, implement more ideas. We see these big companies doing it all the time, and
Yeah, and there's some really innovative stuff that's happening in corporations as well. So like there are companies that have certain play spaces that they've created in their work offices so that you can go just play video games and get some creative juices going. There's some ways that you can use Lego to build teams, and that's really interesting to allow people just to kind of be more creative. And so it's not like we haven't been doing anything, but I do think there's more that has to happen, because we want people to feel like they can contribute, whatever they are, whatever position they have.
100%. And I've always thought that putting someone in a cubicle is not the best way of getting the most productive outcome from them, and giving them workplaces that allow them to be themselves and cooperate with other individuals around them, their colleagues, and maybe push the boundaries,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I think organizations will really flourish, is when they do start pushing the boundaries, taking some risks, and embracing those that are around, within the workplace. But also when, learning in the workplace, we have to think about when we become adults, workplaces become 80% of our time. Like, we are really in our work, and it's even more pronounced now in an economy that's maybe more stressed, and people have to take more jobs to make ends meet. So learning and development takes a lot more of a presence in those spaces, because 80% of our time is at work. So therefore, we need to continue to learn as adults, because otherwise we just become stagnant and we don't reach our full potential. So I like to see us really embrace more learning, and that can happen very fluidly. It doesn't have to be like a formal workshop. It could just be you're having a conversation by the water cooler, and you're just saying, "What did you learn today? What are you working on?" And then you kind of get a sense. It's called incidental learning. It's where we're kind of learning just through encounters with one another and just opening for dialogue. And so that's so it can happen in many different ways, and I think that's where we have some real potential to kind of, it doesn't necessarily need to be in a formal situation. That helps, but there's informal ways, other incidental ways that we can learn. And again, like since we spend so much time in the workplace, why don't we just continue to use the workplaces as an educational space?
Wouldn't that require effort from the company side to allow for this?
Yes, and some companies not want to do that.
Right.
And again, they have standardized learning, they have modules, and they have
The workshops, like you mentioned.
workshops and things that they have just, and sometimes I'm seeing, and certainly around my work around diversity, inclusion, they would bring in a workshop, a facilitator to lead a workshop, for example, on 2SLGBTQ or immigrant realities or any type of other just marginalized group. And that's a 3-hour workshop, maybe 3 hours, and then they think they've solved the problem. And
they think it's one and done.
No, it's done and done. And they don't bring it back ever again. And I would like to encourage organizations to move past that model because it doesn't work in the literature, it doesn't work in the research. We clearly need to have an ongoing program of learning and education. And if we don't have that program, then it's money not well spent, in my opinion. So much more better to invest in. And getting that political will is really important, as you kind of alluded to. Having leaders who are really open to having people coming in and really work clearly, either through mentorship, through ongoing programs or such, and just start to see the benefits. It doesn't happen instantly. That's the issue. That's the issue, I think, with a lot of employers, that they want instantaneous results out of their money.
And they want direct results too.
And I'm like, no, in this, when you're working with people, it takes time, and we're not AI. And that's a good thing.
I believe, yeah. But do you think about AI at all? I mean, how it's shaping our reality these days?
Yeah, it is really reshaping workplaces and it's really early days still, despite I'm sure AI has been around much longer than we've become cognitively aware of it. I think it's early days, but I do think people will be using it more for educating themselves. Mm-hmm. But we have to remind ourselves that AI is not perfect. It's making mistakes, and I've been continually seeing that in my work. But I'm also seeing that it's led by corporations itself. So they would have, AI has its own agenda that's designed by the corporations.
And it'll have its own biases too.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of people pointing out the biases within AI. And so that means we have to approach it with caution. It's a tool, perhaps, to a certain extent at the moment.
Interesting. I always thought of, recently I thought that when AI starts to become a thing, like 3 years ago, I thought it'll take repetitive tasks, but it started creating things. Like if you ask ChatGPT to create an image, it'll create image, stable diffusion or whatnot, and it'll come up with an image. Yep. And I thought, that's done. Okay, it started creating images, so it's creative. Yeah. And it can write a poem. Not a good one, but it'll still do it, right? Yeah. So I thought, if it can do the creative work, what are we human? Where do we fit in this?
And that's a big concern of mine, because we lose out on the relationship building that we do when we do creative work. So you're starting off painting, you're starting off creating music or something, or poetry. You may be engaging with other people of that same background and kind of creating a synergy, learning from each other and such. So when you've got AI just doing it, you lose that. True. You lose that kind of human connection. But there is a bit of creativity within AI, in a sense, from prompt literacy, or where you can just be creative with your prompting skills, and that is a form of creativity. But I still think that we need to focus on the process of creating, rather than what's that wonderful painting you just made. By focusing more so on the process of creating, then that really accentuates the I guess I could say the undermining elements to creation. So it could be that human connection, it could be skill development, trying new directions with your artwork, trying to be much more aligned with what's happening with the world through your creative energies. So the process itself maybe become much more what we should focus on, and less so on the output.
They went out of business when the camera showed up, and because they were very specific in their task. They would paint portraits for families, for individuals, and then this new technology camera came along and they were out of business, right?
Yeah, I know.
And it became more of a luxury thing to get your portraits done and all that.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think with information age, with internet, we had the blast of information, democratization of information. I think AI will facilitate what do you call democratization of learning.
Yes.
It can allow more learning if I am willing and I can ready to put in time. I can learn new things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a good tool to have. The accessibility is really important with AI. But I think it's also a good reminder to us as a human species to just think maybe all learning should be accessible. Maybe we should be able to just ask each other some insight, some guidance that while it's a tool, there are other people in the room besides just the AI monitor, you know?
True.
Yeah.
So our systems are designed in a way we go from high school to adult learning and then we get into the workforce
Yes.
and learning stops completely or
Well,
takes a side.
Yes, it takes
backseat.
a backseat. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so in that case, how can we align political will companies to, push the learning curve a little higher so that people can learn more at workplaces?
That's the magic question. Because often I see government and corporate organizations kind of running on they're on different speeds and they're on different journeys around adult learning. And we lose out when we don't have them all on the same page. And I would love it if and folding in, I want to see also the colleges and universities also part of that conversation too in their lifelong learning programs that are available. I think that if we can kind of get a draft away where they're all in communication with one another about what can one organization do and one can't, but maybe they can do other things, and then kind of start to really take more seriously adult learning across the lifespan. And this is moving also into post-retirement ages as well, because you can live 20 to 30 years now after your retirement. And so therefore, you may want to continue learning, of course, and you may want to have those options. So I think that if we can get those different bodies just talking to one another is the first step. And also valuing what could happen when you focus on adult learning in the workplace, like what can actually happen and to workers. It helps retain them. It helps them build their new skill sets, new understandings. It helps organizations take risks, which is what we all, I think, should be moving toward, and trying some new directions. And that's what adult learning helps foster. But until we get everybody on the same page about that, we won't reach that true maximum potential that I think that's important.
I think part of the problem in my understanding of this whole scenario is companies don't understand teaching our employees will increase their output, which means more output for the company itself.
Yeah, sure.
And that's why there's less effort on giving them the tools to work with diverse problems and make more out of it. And right now what we are following is you have got this task, get this done, and that's it. It's very myopic in my understanding.
Yeah, absolutely, and I see that continuously, where you just see this is how you're supposed to reach from A to B, and we all know in our career journeys, and I'm not too sure about yours, but mine has always been a bit of a curving way. I started off as an elementary school teacher, and then I moved into nonprofit, and then I moved into higher education, and still having an educational lens to it, but still finding different venues to explore teaching and learning and leading practices. But I think if we think that people, which I think is not so uncommon, where people have career paths that are very windy in finding new directions at any time, they may have multiple careers. I certainly have students coming in from working in banking backgrounds and in corrections and other areas, and they want to become teachers. So they're obviously making radical shifts, very, want to try something different with their career. And that could happen multiple times. And so if we think about that people have these multiple career journeys, and yet we still expect workers to still go from A to B clearly in a linear way. I think that's not quite aligned with what's happening in current trends around people's career journeys. That we have to start thinking that maybe we can draw on their prior experience in another careers, learn from that, and maybe try creating C, D, and E in a way to help promote their development as workers and therefore benefit the organization.
True. I think a lot of our ways are still from the Industrial Revolution, where get these things done and we get this product and that's it. But we live in a very different world now where companies have a different role altogether. They control information, they control how things flow, and we live in a very globalized world now compared to 100 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And globalization's really created an interesting conundrum for everybody. I mean, it's been around, of course, colonialism was a form of globalization, but also just moving forward to where we are now with advancement in technologies and movement of people. And so I think what globalization's done is that, so you can have a corporation or a university even, or have a campus or a site in one country and then multiple sites in other countries too, which means that people from different cultural backgrounds, even though they're working in their home countries, will now be interacting with people from other countries. Often English is the language, but if it's a French company, then probably French will be the spoken language. But English is the kind of the business language, I guess you can say. And so when you've got these people from various backgrounds, and yet one group is expected to conform to one way of working, I think, again, a missed opportunities, and you can imagine how people would feel that they cannot be their authentic selves within the workplace. So we have to acknowledge and work with globalization, and in a way that's building intercultural competency, intercultural communication, in a way that's respectful and allows ideas to flourish, and for us to arrive to a common understanding.
Interesting. I've always believed there's different ways to be human. There's no one way to cut a pie in my...
Yes, absolutely.
So if I have certain ways of doing things, let's say researching or getting things done in my job, maybe those are beneficial in a bigger group.
Yeah.
But I came across this argument when I was in going through my undergrad. Diversification dilutes the originality.
Oh, interesting.
Well, and I know you're someone who works greatly in this field,
I mean, what's the original idea? Like, if the original idea is like, I work in a university setting that's turning 150 years old. So if I were to respect the original ideas made from 150 years ago, then I'd see a very different type of work and learning situation, because the values of 150 years ago are way different than they are now. And I think in a good way that now, where we're at, back then, I think it would be harder for people of various backgrounds to access higher education. And now it's much more accessible. It's not perfect, but it's getting much better than it was 150 years ago. And so, we need to get rid of some of those original ideas and those original architectures of what things are like, and yes, add some diversification in a way that's strengthening and acknowledging where we're currently at in our human development, reflecting back on globalization and the increase of diversification everywhere. So let's work with it. I mean, the dilution of original ideas, I guess we got to question what the original idea is first.
I believe what she was trying to say, and this is like 4 years ago, I could have...
Fair, yeah.
Right? Not said in the right way or something, but what she meant was, I believe, that diversification of classrooms or diversification of societies can dumb down the original culture
Right.
of how things were done and how there were certain ways of getting things done.
Maybe for historical reasons, it's good to look at that, but I still feel like social change is always everywhere. We're continually moving as people. I'm not I guess I'd have to speak to whoever you're speaking with because I don't really, I'm not too sure I entirely agree with that.
And I wasn't fully sure that if
Yeah.
I 100% agree with what she said, but
Yeah,
it was an
yeah.
interesting thought. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So again, if you're working with an original idea, yes, perhaps that was worked at a really good time and people really benefited well for a certain group. But I think part of originality should also be changing with society and changing with our knowledge. You know, the younger generation is much smarter than when I was their age, and that's the good thing. That's what should have happened. Like, you know, education has enhanced our thinking, but we need to continue to strive to reach our potential.
100%.
Yeah, because I think there's something to be said about, you know, when I'm working with some people and they say, I'm too nervous to speak in front of people, and that really, public speaking is just really paralyzes them. But if we start to work with that person to try to say, here, you know, let me mentor you in this way over time. We'll start small with you speaking in front of a small group and then expanding. And you know, as an optimistic person, I always feel like that could help people learn that skill of public speaking. It's just through education and that support so that they can eventually reach that goal and try and say, I've done it. I have spoken in front of 30 people and I felt okay with it. And that's a huge accomplishment for many, you know.
100%.
Yeah.
Even for me, I've had issues speaking in public. So when I get stage frights and I'm like, oh, speaking in front of so many people. Yeah. So someone like me can use that skill and, you know, it'll be a big shift for me.
Huge shift. And then you can put that on your resume and then maybe that will open you up to new opportunities as well. But you're speaking already very well. I have to say, just like a little.
I'm okay as long as there's 2 or 3. And as the moment it goes over 10, I'm like, hold on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So those are so that's where I see education can be really helpful. And then maybe I feel like employers have missed that mark there a little bit, where they're focused more so on, you know, modules or to get certain things done in a certain way or understand certain policies, which has a space. But I feel like let's get down to talking about each other as humans, as we're doing now, and learn about things that we'd like to work on. And I think that should be a never-ending process. Yeah.
And I was going through your TED Talk and I saw the story that you told in the TED Talk where you were sitting on a bench wearing a neon jacket. If you can quickly tell that story.
Oh, yes. I was 16 years old. Yeah, it was... So I don't know why, it was 1990s. So neon was the big color at that time in my province in Ontario. And I was feeling alone. I was really, as a gay teenager, I was kind of feeling like in a rural area, I was not feeling like there were other people like me around. So it was a really sad point. I wasn't at a very, I wasn't really at a dark part, but it was, you know, as a teenager, it's hard, you know, and you always want to find people to connect with so you don't feel so different. And I was struggling with that. And so I guess the neon jacket was almost sending out a beacon, which I didn't think about. Maybe I was subconsciously wearing that jacket as a cry for help. But this woman noticed me in the park as I'm sitting on the bench by the riverfront in Exeter, Ontario. And this woman noticed me from across the river, and she sent her son over to me and sent a note telling me if I needed help, here's where you can go talk to. And then he wandered off, and she kind of waved, and off they went. And that was it, just a passing kindness. And that meant a world to me. And I just thought, oh, someone's acknowledged, you know, that I may be hurting. She wasn't questioning why. She didn't know anything about me, really. But just felt that maybe I needed somebody. And I think that's what we could always look out for each other, you know, in that way. When we see each other kind of looking or feeling, hey, you don't seem to be on, you know, lately. Is there something up? Or just here's somebody who I found was very helpful. Maybe it'd be helpful to you, you know, here's a resource for you. So I feel like that's what happened. And then it sparked my whole interest in rural LGBT life.
So we come from India, and we have seen LGBT parades there, Pride Month,
Yeah.
and it's shaping our community and our society in a very different manner, which people are a little hesitant,
Yes.
some of them,
Yes.
and
of
at the
course.
same time,
Of course.
a lot of people are accepting of it too.
Yeah, for sure.
So, if we have to explain it or make a better understanding argument, like, okay, here's how you can understand this step by step,
Mm.
and including me,
Mm.
I understand LG. I get problem with two. I don't understand what does that mean? 2S or
Okay.
QIA. Can you
Sure.
help me with that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe help some of the readers too. Some people who are certainly new to Canadian fabric, and I must say also Canadians don't have also struggle with the acronym. It's changed over the years. And just to give a bit of reference, I used to have the G first for gay, lesbian, GLBT. But we felt that lesbians were multiply marginalized as being women and also being a sexual minority. So the L got moved forward to the first. And so we've played with the acronym so that the positioning of the acronym in a sense is important. And,
Okay.
but it's also the letters itself. So now we are moving in Canada toward 2S, two-spirit, that goes before the L, typically at the moment. And although I myself have started to put the T forward a little bit.
Can I stop you right there? What does 2S stands for?
I'll get to, yeah.
Okay.
So 2S, two-spirit. Two-spirit people are come from Canadian Indigenous backgrounds, so they could be Inuit, Métis, Anishinaabe, First Nations, or of any kind of Indigenous background, but they're also identifying as being a sexual and gender minority as well. So they fail, and two-spirit people are their own subculture within the Indigenous community, and so they also, so they could be identifying as gay or lesbian, trans, or bi, but they're also acknowledging that their Indigenous roots are very important to them too. Their Indigenous identities. So it's almost like a marriage between their Indigenous communities and the LGBTQ community. Now, some two-spirit people may feel part of the LGBTQ community, and some may not.
Okay.
So they perhaps would just identify just as two-spirit, and sometimes they feel okay with feeling a part of the group. And we push them forward because they are original people of this land, and so they are honored. We honor their history within Canada because they've been here among the first peoples of Canada. So I think does that help a little bit with the
Yes, 100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's their background, and then trans. Are you okay with trans being the T? Transgender, but we now shorten to just trans because there could be transsexual or transgender.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so and just because we're just acknowledging that trans is an actual identity group, and we want to move away from the discussions. Well, did someone have surgery or not? So just they're trans if they feel like they're typically born into the wrong body in a sense, and therefore want to have more. They want to have their identity, their appearance, and their identity kind of more in alignment.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and these are groups of people that I've seen all over the world, I have to say. Like there are,
It's they've been part of society for the longest time.
I
Yeah.
think of the Hijira in India, exactly.
Yeah.
As an example. But also in Papua New Guinea, a lot of indigenous communities have had trans people all over the world. So it's not a new thing in Canada. Perhaps what's maybe the newer part is more their trans visibility, which, because we have more inclusive laws now around gender identity and gender expression, so therefore people are feeling more comfortable to come out. There's, again, social change, social development is happening so that we're becoming a little bit more understanding. So I like to think that anyways, and so therefore people are feeling a little bit more comfortable coming out as transgender. And so people are coming out at all ages, of course. From 5 or 6, they're starting to question their gender, to 65, 70 years old. And so it's quite a range.
Okay.
Yeah. So what was the other? I think you had questions about intersex.
IA or
Yeah. So
okay.
intersex is I, and those are people who are born with both male and female genitalia.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the issue with the facing intersex community is that when they're born, doctors and parents decide which gender they have, and therefore create, surgically alter the baby. And so we want to have more rights for these individuals to decide their gender as they grow up, and just have ownership over their own bodies.
And allow with them knowledge so that they can make a sound decision for themselves.
Their own decisions about where they lie on the gender spectrum. And then the A is the asexuals, and those are people who just they don't have sexual relations with people, but they still feel very much feelings and romantic feelings toward others, but they just they don't have a sexuality in a sense, and they feel like that needs more further discussion. A sometimes also means allies, so you gotta also, but typically it's asexuals. Yeah.
Interesting. I've always wondered. I never get
fair. So sometimes you also see the plus sign, and lately we've been doing the plus sign. So again, this could all change in the next year. Like which is a good thing. Keeps us on our toes. Keeps me on my toes. The plus sign mean to a couple of things. One is to acknowledge that there may be identities that are not within the acronym that we also want to acknowledge. So otherwise you'll have a long list.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I can't say the long acronym that
it gets hard after one point.
So it's supposed to acknowledge the non-normative genders or identities or sexualities that aren't captured in the acronym, but also to acknowledge that historically HIV was infecting a lot of gay men, and therefore they also felt, because of their HIV positive status, that didn't felt as welcomed within the LGBTQ community, which is their home community, like something that they feel really once proud of and been a part of. And so the plus sign is meant to, reaffirm support for people who have HIV, who also identify as 2SLGBTQ, to just say that please do continue to be a part of the community, and also to help educate those who are still having some sort of stigma or prejudice towards those with HIV. So that's
very interesting.
Yeah. So it's very political, and I'm sure I'm giving you a very rough version of each of these.
But no, this is perfect because you allowed for understanding for a layman to understand what these letters mean and how they represent and who they represent.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. And your viewers can certainly go in and look into deeper into the conversation through a good search on the internet with their favorite browser. And I don't promote one or the other, but anyways, they can certainly go in and dig a little deeper. And I'm giving just a very broad overview. But there's deeper line issues. I think a separate podcast on each of the identities could be also just as worthwhile.
Interesting. Coming back to this idea where workforce learning, or when you're in the workforce learning, can allow for more output and can increase the status quo.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, let's say, this modern education system that we have, where we learn till this certain age and then we stagnate, we don't learn anything? How can we incorporate more learning outside of the workplace?
There's lots of opportunities. I mean, even just looking at your library, and you have different types of workshops and lectures, but also the universities and colleges in whatever community would have public lectures. Yeah. Always there's lectures going on, and you could just jump in on any of those. If you're over 65, you do have access at the University of Manitoba. You do have free access to our courses. It's
really
there's no tuition. So getting to that point of finding your course that you want to study and everything may be a little bit more of a challenge. But there is that resource there that you just have to navigate certain processes and begin with general education studies and then hopefully find your way. But I would say that also extended education or continuing education is a unit within a university that's supposed to help support people to come back to school and learn certain skills, project management skills, human resource skills, other types of things that they just want to learn and maybe promote themselves through their careers or try something new. So I think those are options. Community centers have always been really useful spaces. I just did a major national study on rural prides in Canada. So I traveled across the country visiting small towns and small communities, and I was like, what does the LGBT prides look like in these small towns? Because it's very different than in the big cities, where you have hundreds of thousands of people go. Winnipeg is quite a large one. But in small towns, they have small towns of 5,000 people, maybe 10,000, and they want to still have a pride event, And there I see a lot of adult learning happening where people are just, they're asking questions about, what do I do? My granddaughter just came out as lesbian. What do I do? To how can I better support people in the workplace? How can I better support queer, trans youth? So there's lots of discussions happening at these pride events. And again, I saw eight, 9 of them. So I had a pretty good understanding what's happening. I went to over 45 events. I was just overwhelmed with the amount of really helpful, productive dialogue that's happening. Because if you want to attend a pride event, then that means as soon as you walk onto that fairground or whatever that space is, you're showing an openness to learn and opening to dialogue.
True.
And then once you're there, you can ask questions to anybody. Honestly, that's such a friendly crowd.
So, did you notice any difference between pride events in the big cities compared to the small cities?
I've been out for like 20, 30 years now, and I have noticed. I think that when I was attending the pride events in rural communities now, it reminded me of the 1990s. Much more community-driven, volunteer-led, education-focused, really wanting to promote human dignity and human respect for everybody, as opposed to what I'm seeing at the urban prides now, which is a little bit more of a celebrational tone. I guess you could say corporate investments. They're starting to get a little bit more edgy and political with acknowledging the diversity of issues facing the queer communities.
Okay.
And get more queers more politically active in like conflicts overseas and such, and in social issues around racism and ableism and such. So there is some political bent, but it's a different vibe in a rural community where you may have a protester show up at a rural community, and that could be the person you went to high school with for years and years, and you've known them for years and years.
It's a very tight-knit
community. Very tight-knit. Yeah. So then you can go up and say, what are you doing? Like, where are you at? Like, you can have that actual conversation with the protesters because they're your neighbors. I think in an urban setting, you won't necessarily know the protesters.
Who's protesting, yeah.
And so you may feel a bit more hesitant to approach them because you don't know how they're going to respond. And you certainly don't need a lecture about whatever script that they're following, So I think everyone should should go to a rural pride event because I think it's really heartwarming and welcoming and informative in so many ways. And it doesn't take long they're often half an hour outside a city.
Sure, yeah.
And then you can get a sense of what some of the issues that they're facing, as well as some of the joys and achievements they're making too, because they can be very progressive because they can get things done much quicker than in cities. Are you from a small town or in India?
So I'm from a big city in India.
Okay.
I moved to Canada 10 years ago. So I've lived in Vancouver for 4+ years and then moved to Winnipeg in 2020, peak of COVID. I have a question. So to have a better understanding, so you said you came out 23 years ago.
Yeah, 20 or 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lost track of time.
I think it's been it's 25 years. I think
25 plus. Years. Okay. Yeah. And back then it was a small movement. Now it has turned into a global phenomenon.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
What changes have you seen in that time within your community and how people perceive and how people look at this community now?
We're seeing within the community, we see a lot more intersectionality, which is great. So intersectionality.
What is
so you can be black and queer, you can be deaf and queer and black, so a lot more identities rather than because historically queerness was really depicted as a white issue within Canada in a sense, and they didn't think that immigrants would have a sexuality. They didn't think international students have it.
You'll be surprised how many friends I had in India who moved to Canada and then came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Exactly.
It's and I would ask them, why wouldn't you say that back in India. Like it wasn't allowed for, he said.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the law has recently changed in India, but it was still. But Canada's been a little bit more longer with its laws and is more accepting within its laws. But I mean, but there's still movements across the world. So I think that's one thing I've noticed is the plurality of the queer identity. But I would think that I think there's more acceptance from the broader Canadian society toward 2SLGBTQIA plus people. I think that's always that's growing. And it's largely because I contribute to the movements that's happening, the protests that have happened in the 90s, the activism that was trying to get changes to federal and provincial legislations and such, and then see more education. I think that's probably where I would say that we still struggle with is that there's not enough education about the queer community from within the primary, secondary school sector. Like it really depends right now on the teacher to have that good professional judgment to be inclusive. But I think there's nothing in the curriculum.
There's nothing in the curriculum?
No, there's nothing in the curriculum. I mean, you can have, again, a very inclusive school administrator saying, hey, Pride is happening now. Let's send the kids to Pride, or let's have a Pride event in the school. So that's always very exciting to see that. But there's nothing mandated. And I would love to see that more within a curriculum, cross-curriculum, what's the queer perspective on some of the topics that they're including. We don't have that yet. And I think there's only one province that has that, and that's British Columbia. So I think that's on the horizon, again, my optimistic self, but it does take time.
Because you're changing the structure and the system itself.
Yeah, and curriculums need to be renewed every few years. So maybe when the renewal comes up on the social studies curriculum, for example, that's where they can make some more inclusion. Phys ed when that gets updated, then they can start thinking more inclusive. But again, you need that, as we talked about earlier, that political will to just say, okay, make this a purposeful act of inclusion. Do include this content in the next revision of the curriculum. So I think that's necessary. I don't see enough in the post-secondary education sector, to be honest. I think I would love to see a lot more of that. And that's a different type of system, rather than the primary, secondary schools.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Explain me. Let me take you back to this thing that we talked about earlier. Let's say someone at age of 5 or 6 thinks he's not the right sexual orientation, or I don't understand. I don't know how to phrase it correctly.
Sure.
But let's say 5 or 6 year old kid doesn't understand what his body is and or her body is. What age is the right age to educate kids about queer and LGBTQIA and all that? In your opinion,
all ages.
All ages.
They should be taught as young as they're able to understand. That's when they should start being taught. And you can teach very easily. Parents can teach this through children's books that are been published, very widely accepted and very highly respected children's books that can just explain that there are kids who just feel like they're born in the wrong body, or they want to play with their gender and gender expression. And it's meant to really help educate and also help support those who may be questioning, who may want to explore so they can see themselves in the book. But I think from a young age it should happen, actually, because that's how we have to acknowledge this has been a part of Canadian fabric for a long time, and we look to the Two-Spirit people to help educate us there. But for a long time, so why don't we work with that rather than keep silencing a group of people
instead of suppressing it?
It's there. I had not here at the University of Manitoba, but when I worked in Toronto, I had a student, and she was following, again, a second career teacher. Someone wanted to become a teacher from another career. And she said to me, I don't know how to educate my son on LGBTQ2S issues. And I said, okay, well, you can have a conversation. But every time something comes on the TV, she turns off the TV if it's queer themed. So I said, well, that's a lot of turning off.
And that will even intrigue him more to.
Exactly. So I said, how old is the son? And she said, and I thought he was 5 or 6. And she said, he's 12.
Okay.
And I said, 12 years old, he knows. He knows playgrounds, recesses, kids talk, everyone talks. Another kid comes out of the classroom. Everyone's got to have a pedagogy, a kind of have a moment to learn, understand that child's reality. He knows.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that parents have to realize, is that their kids are very smart. They know what's happening in the world. And when they see that their parent is suppressing those conversations, or the teacher is suppressing that conversations, they start to think about, I think they rightfully could question why are their parents doing this? Why are the teachers doing this? And become more naturally interested.
Yeah,
So
you get more inclined towards, why did she turn off the TV at that point?
Yeah, exactly. And then they're sleuths. They'll find out, either not through directly with the parents or teachers, but through their friends. So I think that we just have to acknowledge that curiosity and just work with
At
that.
early age.
At early age. And also realize that adults have not had hardly any exposure. So they have knowledge gaps too. So they need to also have some education.
I don't know if I fully agree with this, sir, to be honest, but I have a follow-up question. And at what age the transition should be allowed?
Oh, right. Okay. So that's a very controversial question.
Okay. Okay.
So there's different camps, and transitioning in the sense of body, like surgery in itself.
Yes,
so,
or taking pills that allows them for hormonal changes, I believe, I guess.
when the child feels like they want to do that. It's
Okay.
not okay. But at the same time, I understand there may be safeguards that the medical establishment may have, and they may want to say, okay, they could suppress puberty for a few years. That kind of medication could be fine to allow the child to have that gender exploration, in sense, and try and living their opposite gender, and maybe not the surgery itself until the child becomes an adult. So that's 18 years old. But I think that what's important here is for the child to have a learning environment that would support them. And right now in Manitoba, we have that. We have it's in the legislation. It's in the Manitoba Teachers Society Code of Conduct. All kids must be supported. That's number one rule. So regardless of their background, everyone needs to be supported. And so that means that kids could, if they feel...
And I truly believe that all kids should be supported and helped. But
yeah, so they could come in and they say, this is my new pronoun, this is my new name, but that may change when I go home because my parents are not supportive of that. So that does happen where kids change their clothing and their name, and the teachers respect what name they arrive at and what pronouns they want to use. And because that's just part of respecting all children. It's also a child protection issue, a child abuse issue too, because we want children to feel safe to do that, to feel who could be who they want. It's also helps prevent suicide too, because trans kids, for example, are 3 times more likely to commit suicide. So we need to save lives by being inclusive.
And do you think, you said trans kids are committing more suicides?
Suicide and suicide ideation.
Ideation, okay. Is that because their parents aren't accepting of that at home and they have to do a transition when they go home?
Well, yes, or they may not just feel brave enough to transition in general. And so there's a struggling and living in the wrong body, and they cannot change because parents could forbid them. They don't feel like they're in a learning environment that would support it. So there's multiple factors here.
Yeah.
So we want to try to encourage much more of a support services whenever we can for all students, wherever they are in their journeys. But so I think that's where I land with your question. And of course, this is all done as a team approach with psychiatrists and medical doctors and social workers and teachers, so that more wraparound support here is needed and constant communication to support that student moving forward.
Have you ever came across this argument where parents might say kids feel like 1,000 things a day, right? Like they they want to do certain thing one day and then they change their mind the other.
Yeah.
But if any medical intervention is done right now, they won't have the option to go back to.
Well, that's where again, I don't know of any legislation or jurisdiction that allow surgical intervention on kids. I
Okay.
think that happens later on when they're adults. So maybe people will let me know if there is but it's because kids, yes, I agree that kids change their minds so often. I would think, though, a gender expression or gender identity is a very serious decision for them to make. But, I mean, I grew up with kids. There were guys showing up wearing dresses because they wanted to just explore that, and they just do. And then, yes, they may go back to wearing pants or whatever they want to wear in the next week or what have you. Then they're just exploring and they're just playing with gender, And I think that's fine. Even if they say, oh, it's not for me, that's not for me. But sexuality doesn't develop to puberty. So really until 12 years old is where you start seeing people start questioning their sexuality. And there's nothing wrong, again, it's the same approach we've taken with sexuality is that do what you feel comfortable, make sure it's consensual, and continue to just, learn more about yourself. And realize that what you may, and then when they feel like they want to continue on that journey, just allow them to continue on that journey.
From what I understand, you are of a perspective that give them the tools, give them the resources, and give them the knowledge, and let them decide for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And the supports that are there. So ensure guidance counselors in schools are supportive. Administration is really important here, and teachers, of course. So that they feel like they can just continue on with their path. And again, they could decide, I still think that gender is a pretty big decision, but it's not like joining the chess club and then deciding I hate chess. That's a different thing in some way. But I think just, that having the supports there, just to continue with that along. And if they decide at the end, and some kids do, that some gender creative kids feel like, oh, that was a really fun period of my life, and now I'm just going to continue on living. I'm born with a penis, so therefore I'm going to live with as a boy because I learned. At least they're playing with the gender, and they allow an environment to do so, and they're not having any surgery at that point. They're just playing, until they become more of an adult and they're working with, and again that wraparound support is all there. Hopefully that follows throughout their lifespan as needed. So.
Interesting. No, this is very interesting stuff, and I got to learn a lot of new things from you.
Oh, good.
I have one more thing that I wanted to discuss with you is I have no idea how it works. I'm very oblivious of how these pronouns work, and
all right.
Please teach me. Please educate me.
Good question. They're relatively new phenomenon, newish. I'm sure people have used it. Well, people have used they as a pronoun in the past for a long time. But it's a little bit more articulated now, I guess you could say. But so some people feel like they are non-binary. So it means they don't believe that they are either male or female. They are non-binary.
Okay.
Okay. They're not in those binary opposites. So therefore, the pronouns don't really work for them because they're not he or not a she. So they want to use they instead as a singular pronoun. And we've used they in the past in English language. We use they, if we don't know the gender of the person. It's just been something that we've used, but perhaps we just didn't question it before until the latest, last 10 years where political movements around non-binary identities have started. So they is what's used now. There are other types of non-binary pronouns, je, she, for example. I don't see them very often. And I don't know quite a lot about why they work for that person rather than another person who wants they. But we just have to respect what they want to say, and if that's how they are. We have a federal law in place around gender expression, and that would fall into it. So we legally have to respect whatever gender expression it is in the workplace.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah. So if you had a colleague using they, them, then we legally have to respect that.
So I'm legally binded
yeah,
to...
otherwise it's a form of discrimination based on gender identity and gender expression.
And this is all based upon how someone feels.
Yeah. Yes. So
Okay.
it feels like the gender spectrum, the gender binary does not work for them. So I am actually seeing a lot more that, if I have to say, like, one thing that caught fire relating back to globalization has been the non-binary. Like, this has gone global, which tells me there was a lot of people in the closet about their non-binary identities and they weren't feeling safe. Then all of a sudden, as soon as that movement started, but again, 10 years ago, roughly, it just went viral. And I hadn't seen such a viral queer movement before that went global, was the non-binary. So telling, again, I work internationally. I've traveled the world and worked with queer communities all over the world. And I feel like when I see that keep happening across other societies, then there's something there about the human species that we have to consider as being that maybe we are being too narrow in our assignment of gender, of male, female. Remember, that's different than sex.
Okay.
Gender is different than sex. So sex is the genitalia that you're born with. So there's...
And gender is the social construct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So
Okay. I hope that helps.
yeah, that does help. So someone like I've heard a lot of Jordan Peterson, and he's of a point of view that this is not helping.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
You must have come across some of his work. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Like, how does...
I don't really read his work, but I know he has this position. I feel like is he saying that's not helping because of psychological?
yeah, it's
of
not
people?
helping the students or the kids if they want to be addressed as certain or with certain pronoun. It's not helping their psyche or psychology.
I guess I'm just seeing that differently. I'm seeing people when they are respected for their pronouns and their gender identity, they're flourishing. So I can't. That's always been a part of what we do within the queer community. We come out to have a greater sense of happiness and be content with our lives and be proud of who we are, and therefore lives to a happier point of our lives. And when you're more happy, you're more engaged in civic engagement in your workplaces, in your communities and such, and we become much more prosperous people.
100%.
Right?
I agree.
That's there. So how could... I don't understand that point. Maybe you can explain it to me at another time, but how could that be detrimental to individuals? No one's forcing... I haven't seen cases where kids are ever forced to say or do or be somebody else, other than being heterosexual and being cisgender, so being a person who's not transgender.
Okay.
Those are forced, and that's where I see very painful moments happening in people's lives. And that's why we have the suicide rates, addictions rates, and very alarming health rates of all kinds facing the queer community. So I would say that I don't agree with Jordan Peterson's view on that. I do think that there's a space that people, when you have a supportive environment, then people can flourish, and that's what we always want to aspire to become. And that we as individuals have no right to infringe on the other person's lives.
100%.
Right. So we live our own lives authentically and allow others to do the same.
I think this is a very good note to end this, and it's been a very interesting conversation. I had so much fun talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this, sir.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Pleasure to have you on the show.